And back live at Iverwin Stadium. I'll tell you what, Flutie may be the best quarterback. Jackie Parker, I watched him as a boy in the 50s at Clark Stadium. The best all-around player by a mile. Quarterback, halfback, played defense. And talking about football players and football stories from the past, joined by Stephen Brunt from the Toronto Globe and Mail, who is a Hamilton resident. You write in the paper today, I went to high school here, Hamilton is not Regina, but it is the only place in the East where the Canadian football is still part of the local mythology.
Yeah, I think that's true. You know, and it's still here to some degree. It's not quite like it was when I was growing up here. It's different, and you know, I think it's sort of like Regina is sort of like where people still believe in Santa Claus, and it's the greatest thing in the world. And here, I think people are kind of pretending they still believe in Santa Claus, and it's a little bit more nostalgia maybe than it is reality. But it's fun, and you couldn't do it in Toronto, you couldn't do it in Montreal, and you couldn't do it in Ottawa.
All right, it's interesting you say you couldn't do it in Toronto. I was at Westdale High School this week for a piece we're going to run tomorrow. Jimmy Young went there, Russ Jackson, Harry Howell, Gabriel out of Burlington. We talk about the schools. Toronto's not that far down the road. I don't want to insult Hamilton, but this is almost part of Toronto now. And yet, what, they're 2-for-1 tickets, you told me this afternoon, and 7,000 remaining.
That's it. And I think that's, you know, Bob Nicholson was in before and talked about the impact Doug Flutie had this year. And he's right. I think they did a great job. They spent a ton of money. They brought the greatest player in the modern history of the league in, and had a great team on the field. But look, they had 8,000 seats to sell when Toronto got into the Grey Cup. They now have, what, 7,000 seats to sell? That's 1,000 people in a city of 4 million that are willing to drive 45 miles.
But I talked about the perception with Larry Smith. The perception this league is not major league is a big problem in Toronto and Vancouver and Montreal. How do you overcome that?
Well, I don't know that you can. And I think it's going to become a bigger problem because of where the league's going to go. The restructuring Larry Smith talks about is going to make it less big league, at least as far as the veneer goes. We're talking about a league that's becoming smaller, necessarily. They're going to have to become smaller to survive. And I wonder about a smaller league in places like Toronto or Vancouver where, you know, look, we're still in a situation where we're very unsure whether there's going to be a team in Vancouver next year.
But it means something to this country. I was born in Winnipeg. I mentioned going to high school here, but I've lived in the West, in Edmonton. Toronto may get the NFL, not soon, but eventually. But what happens to the rest of the country?
Well, I think the problem is that, look, I think it's a tremendous loss if that's what happens. Culturally, this is unique. It is Canadian. It is all Canadian. You know, and I think the people who still feel that and believe that understand that. The problem is I think we're a minority now. And I just think you have to look around and realize that there are a lot of people for whom it doesn't mean that or just don't get it.
If you were a betting man, where does it sit 2-3 years from now? Is this the last big-time Grey Cup? 7 teams, 8 teams next year? What happens?
I think when you start getting smaller, it's hard to not get a lot smaller. And I think that that's what you're going to see. It reminds me in some ways of senior hockey, where senior hockey at one point in this country was a big deal. And the Allen Cup was second to the Stanley Cup. It was a tremendous championship. And someone still plays for the Allen Cup. I think an American team actually won it last year. But, you know, senior hockey shrank. And to something very small. And I'm wondering if that's where Canadian football is.
You know, it means something in Regina, means something in Edmonton, yet the Grey Cup still gets huge ratings, and you don't get huge ratings without the big centers like Vancouver and Toronto.
That's right. Although those people maybe, you know, those people still tune in. They're all once a year people, aren't they? And they all tune in for this one great thing like it's some kind of tribal memory. They all tune in once a year for the Grey Cup, but they don't. Those people aren't buying tickets. They're not maybe tuning in week to week, and they're not following the game. I think they're doing this because it's something that they think they should do.
I think you hit right on it with the Toronto problem, selling only virtually 1,000 tickets, being so close by. Look for me at the game tomorrow. I said it earlier, to me the great irony is you've got 2 great teams, 2 classy coaches, outstanding players, should be a great game, yet we're talking about a league that may not be here.
Well, we do this, you know, off and on for the last...
It's the Canadian way.
It is the Canadian way.
Don Cherry will tell you that every time.
And it is, look, we're looking at a historically great team in Toronto. As much as I hate to say that as a Hamilton guy, I've got to say it. This is the greatest Argo team I've seen, I think. You know, Don Matthews is a great coach, and against a really tough, gritty Edmonton team, a great organization. They always put a good team on the field. But, you know, that team that beat Montreal last week, and I think Montreal maybe is the second best team in the CFL this year, was awfully impressive. It's going to be, I think you've got a classic matchup in that sense. It's a shame the other stuff gets in the way, but it has to.
Just a couple of seconds, it does have to get in the way. Is Larry Smith back next year?
I don't think so. I suspect not. He might want to be, but I don't think he will be.
Will there be a Grey Cup 3 years from now?
Yes, there will be a Grey Cup, but it won't be like this.
All right. Stephen Brunt from the Toronto Globe and Mail, Hamilton resident, thank you for joining us here this afternoon.